$21,000. That's the exact number I needed. Not 3 months of expenses. Not 6, the number almost every finance channel repeats as the ceiling. A full 12 months, on a salary of $40,000 a year, and I built it in exactly 2 years. Without a raise, without a second job, and without touching my retirement account again after the one time I made that mistake before this fund existed. I want to name the objection before you form it, because I had the exact same one myself the first time someone suggested it to me. 12 months sounds extreme, almost paranoid. Most advice stops at 6, treats it as the responsible ceiling nobody reasonable needs to exceed under normal circumstances. I used to think 6 was the ceiling too, until I actually ran the math on what a real job search costs in this specific economy, and looked honestly at what happened the one time I didn't have enough cushion built up yet. This video is that math, laid out dollar for dollar, including the expensive mistake that made the whole project feel urgent instead of merely optional. Let's start with why 12 months, because that number needs to earn its place in this video before I ask you to take it seriously for your own life and your own specific financial situation. I remember exactly what the 6-month version of this plan felt like before I abandoned it for something bigger. I'd hit the 6-month mark, feel a genuine sense of relief, and then a few months later, watch a friend in my own industry go 8 months between contracts. The math I trusted suddenly felt like it had a hole in it I hadn't accounted for. That gap between the advice everyone repeats and what actually happens to people I know personally is where this whole recalculation started. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported the average duration of unemployment in early 2026 at 22.4 weeks, just over 5 months. That's the average, sitting right around where the standard 6-month advice comes from in the first place, which makes sense once you see the two numbers side by side. But averages hide the tail end of the distribution entirely. And the tail end is exactly where 12 months actually starts to matter in a way 6 months simply can't cover. A Bankrate 2026 survey found 47% of Americans couldn't cover a $1,000 emergency from savings at all. And only 27% of people have the 6 months they themselves say they'd need to feel secure. Meaning, even the widely accepted safe number is already out of reach for most people surveyed. 6 months is already the exception, not the rule, for most people building toward it. 12 months isn't a bigger version of normal, doubled for the sake of feeling extra cautious. It's a different category of insurance entirely, built specifically for the scenario where a job search runs long, or where a second problem stacks on top of the first one before the first has even been resolved. Here's exactly how I turned that principle into a real, specific number for my own life. Instead of leaving it as an abstract goal, I'd never actually calculate. It's also worth naming that the cost of ordinary life hasn't been standing still while this conversation happens. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that consumer prices rose 3.8% over the 12 months ending in April 2026, the largest annual increase in nearly 3 years, with gasoline up 28.4% over that same stretch and grocery prices up 3.2%. A 12-month cushion calculated a year ago is already worth less in real terms today than it was when it was first built, which is part of why I'd rather build toward a number that has some room in it rather than one that's calculated to the exact edge of comfortable. My salary was $40,000 a year, paid as a single filer. Using 2026 federal tax brackets, federal income tax and FICA alone come out to roughly $1,152 a month in combined deductions, leaving approximately $2,850 a month in take-home pay. I'm deliberately using a state with no income tax here to keep the math clean and easy to follow, and I'd encourage you to run your own state's specific numbers rather than copying mine directly, since state tax can meaningfully change this figure, depending on where you live. Then I wrote down my actual necessary monthly expenses, the same way I'd encourage anyone to, rather than guessing at a round number or pulling one from a budgeting app's default categories that don't actually reflect my real life. Rent was $950. Utilities came to $100. Groceries, kept intentionally reasonable without feeling deprived, were $260. Transportation, including gas and insurance combined, was $220. My phone plan was $40. Health insurance, since mine wasn't fully covered through an employer, was $180 a month. Added together, that's $1,750 a month in genuine, non-negotiable necessities that would still need paying, no matter what happened to my income. 12 months of $1,750 is $21,000. That's the target. And it's not an arbitrary round number chosen because it sounded impressive or clean on a screen. It's exactly 12 times the specific monthly figure that would actually keep me afloat if the worst realistic scenario happened. No more padding, added on top, and no less either. Out of my $2,850 in monthly take-home pay, after subtracting the $1,750 in essentials, I had $1,100 left over every single month. That $1,100 wasn't free money sitting around waiting to be spent on whatever felt good in the moment. It was the entire raw material for this project, and exactly how I chose to allocate it is the difference between a fund that would have taken over 8.5 years and one that actually took 2. If I had simply set aside a modest amount and parked it in a regular savings account without touching anything else about my routine or thinking much further about it, here's what that path looks like in real numbers, calculated precisely rather than estimated roughly. At $200 a month, sitting in a standard account paying the national average rate of 0.63% APY, it takes 103 months to reach $21,000. That's 8 years and 7 months. It technically works, eventually, given enough patience. But almost nobody actually sticks with a plan that's slow for that long without abandoning it somewhere along the way, and you remain financially exposed for the entire stretch you're building it. So here's what I did differently instead. System by system. In the exact order I actually applied them. System 1. I moved this fund into a high-yield savings account before saving another additional dollar. High-yield accounts were paying close to 5% APY through 2026, compared to roughly 0.63% at a typical bank, the national average as of Bankrate's August 2026 survey. On a $21,000 balance, that's the difference between earning about $1,050 a year and earning about $132 a year for holding the exact same money, with the exact same FDIC insurance up to $250,000, in a different account that took about 10 minutes to open online. System 2. I wrote down an explicit definition of what counted as a legitimate withdrawal before I ever needed to make one, sitting down specifically to think it through rather than leaving it vague. Job loss, medical bill, essential home or car repair, not a sale, not a trip, not a purchase. I felt pressured into by a moment of excitement or a limited time discount code that would expire by morning. The definition existing in writing, decided in advance while I was calm and not under any pressure, meant I never had to negotiate with myself in the exact moment my willpower was weakest, and rationalizing an exception felt easiest and most justified in the moment. System 3. I automated $720 a month, the majority of my discretionary income, moving out of checking the same day my paycheck landed, before I could see it sitting there in my balance or talk myself into spending it first on something that felt urgent but wasn't. I never mentally counted that money as spendable, so I never had to argue myself out of touching it later. The same way you don't miss money you never see hit your checking account in the first place. At $720 a month, sitting in the high-yield account and earning interest the entire time, the math alone gets you to $21,000 in about 28 months, without pulling any other lever at all. System 4. Every windfall that came in outside my regular paycheck went directly into the fund, with no exceptions made for how small or how tempting each individual one was in the moment. My tax refund, $1,200, went in during month 5. A year-end work bonus, $800, landed in month 12. A small side project brought in $500 around month 18. Holiday money from family added another $600 by month 22. None of it touched my checking account first. None of it became spending money before it became savings. No matter how small each individual windfall felt on its own, compared to the $21,000 target sitting far off in the distance. Combine the automation and the windfalls together, and here's what actually happened. In real time, month by month, $720 a month, automated, compounding quietly in a high-yield account the entire time, plus $3,100 in windfalls landing at 4 specific, predictable points along the way. I crossed the finish line at $21,391 in 24 months. Exactly 2 years on a $40,000 salary, without a raise, and without taking on a second job to make any of it possible. Now let me show you why this specific fund exists in the first place. Because a target number by itself, sitting on a screen, doesn't fully capture what's actually at stake here. About 2 years before I finished building it, an unexpected dental bill came to $1,800, and I didn't have anywhere near that sitting available in any account I could access quickly. I took a hardship withdrawal from my 401k instead, telling myself in the moment it was a one-time exception I'd never actually need to repeat. The kind of promise that feels completely reasonable right up until you're standing at the same decision point again a year later. Here's exactly what that decision actually cost, calculated precisely rather than estimated after the fact. A 10% early withdrawal penalty, $180. Income tax owed on the withdrawal at my bracket, $216. $396 gone immediately, on top of the $1,800 I'd already pulled out of my retirement account and could no longer count toward my future at all. And here's the number that actually changed how I thought about the entire decision once I finally sat down and calculated it properly, instead of just feeling vaguely bad about it. If that $1,800 had simply stayed invested for 30 years at a historical 7% average annual return, a reasonable, fairly conservative long-run assumption for a diversified stock portfolio, it would have grown to roughly $13,700 by the time I'd actually need it in retirement, decades from now. Pulling it out early didn't just cost $396 today. Visible and immediate, and easy to notice, it cost approximately $11,900 in growth I will never get back on a single dental bill that was smaller than one single month of what this new emergency fund now holds comfortably in reserve. That single number, $11,900 in lost future growth, quietly gone forever, without ever showing up on a single statement I'd actually see or think twice about, is most of the real reason this video exists at all, more than the $21,000 target itself. An emergency fund isn't just about avoiding one uncomfortable month of tight budgeting and careful spending. It's about protecting every other account you're not supposed to touch under normal circumstances, the ones with decades left ahead of them, to compound quietly and undisturbed if you just have the discipline to leave them alone, entirely, untouched, regardless of what comes up. I know some of you are already listing in real time the ways your own numbers differ from mine, and I want to take that seriously rather than brushing past it. Your rent is higher than $950. You're carrying a student loan payment. I never had to factor into this plan. You live somewhere $40,000 stretches noticeably less far than it does in the numbers I used here, in a market I didn't have to navigate. All of that is real, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise or wave it away with generic, one-size-fits-all encouragement that doesn't actually account for your specific situation. But none of it changes the underlying mechanism this video is actually built around, the part that matters more than any single dollar figure. None of these 4 systems require a specific income level to function correctly. They require a specific behavior, repeated consistently over time, regardless of how large or small the numbers happen to be for you personally. Opening a high-yield account is free, at any income level, with no minimum balance requirement at most reputable institutions. Writing a definition down is free and takes 10 minutes. Automating whatever amount you actually have available, even if it's $50 a month instead of $720, is available to literally anyone with a bank account and a paycheck. Directing windfalls into the fund instead of spending them is available to anyone who ever receives one, regardless of how large or small that windfall happens to be. A smaller monthly contribution simply means a longer timeline stretched out over more months, not an impossible goal you should abandon before starting. Long is not the same thing as impossible, and that specific distinction is the entire point of this video, more than any individual number in it. I also want to be honest about the 12-month decision itself, specifically, because I don't think it's automatically the right choice for everyone watching this video, and I'd rather say that directly and risk losing some of you than oversell my own approach as universal advice that fits every situation equally well. If your income is highly stable, salaried, with strong job security in a field that hires back quickly after a layoff or a downturn, 6 months genuinely may be enough for your specific situation, and building meaningfully past that point does carry real, measurable opportunity cost, since that extra money isn't invested for long-term growth while it sits earning a modest, fixed return in a savings account instead of compounding in the market. I chose 12 months specifically because my own industry has historically longer average job searches than the national number the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports each year, and because the 401k mistake taught me, expensively and directly, that I would rather overbuild this particular cushion once than risk repeating that same decision a second time. Your version of this exact number should come from an honest, specific look at your own risk profile and your own industry's realities, not simply copied wholesale from mine because it happened to work for me. Let me put every number from this video in one single place, so you can compare them directly against your own situation afterward without having to rewatch the whole thing. Take-home pay, $2,850 a month. Essential expenses, $1,750 a month. 12-month target, $21,000, calculated as exactly 12 times the essentials figure, not the income figure. Baseline pace with absolutely no systems applied at all, 103 months. With automation and windfalls combined and running together, 24 months, ending at a final balance of $21,391. And the true cost of the mistake that started all of this in the first place, $396 in immediate penalties and taxes, plus roughly $11,900 in lost 30-year growth on a bill that was only $1,800 to begin with. 2 years isn't fast in the way people usually want fast to feel when they click on a video promising a system like this one. It's not a hack, and nobody is selling you a shortcut here that skips the actual work. It's a decision made once, automated immediately, and then left alone to compound quietly in the background while the rest of life kept happening around it entirely on its own schedule. Unrelated bills and unrelated wins, both landing whenever they happen to land, independent of the plan running underneath them. The version of me who took that hardship withdrawal at the dentist's office, embarrassed and out of options, and the version of me who finished building this fund 2 years later, calm and no longer worried about the next unexpected bill, are the exact same person, on the exact same salary, living in the exact same apartment, with the exact same job. The only thing that actually changed between those two versions of me was the decision to stop treating my retirement account as a backup emergency fund and finally build a real one instead, on purpose, with an actual written plan behind it rather than good intentions alone. I also want to say plainly that I don't think of the $21,000 sitting in this account as money I'm particularly proud of in some abstract bragging sense. I think of it as the specific thing standing between me and ever having to make that same 401k decision again under pressure. And that's a far more useful way to think about an emergency fund than treating it as a trophy or a milestone to announce. It's insurance, quietly doing its job in the background by never actually needing to be used at all. If any part of this landed for you, open the account tonight before you go to bed, not next month and not after your next paycheck clears, and things feel a little more settled than they do right now. Transfer whatever amount you genuinely can afford. Even if that number is only $20 to start the process moving, the account existing at all is the entire first step, and every other system covered in this video only starts working once. That first one is actually done, and the account is sitting there, ready. If this was useful to you, hit subscribe. Every single week, I break down exactly how the real numbers work, in exact dollars, on real salaries. Not vague motivational advice dressed up as a financial plan with no actual math behind it anywhere. So you can go build your own version of this, starting from whatever you're currently earning right now, on whatever timeline actually fits your specific life, your specific industry, and your specific risk tolerance.